The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, sending crystal fragments across my black dress shoes. 200 wedding guests turned to stare as my sister Madison stood there, her designer gown trembling with rage, pointing one perfectly manicured finger at me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. "Get out," she hissed, her voice cutting through the orchestra's waltz. "You don't belong here, Tyler. You never have." But what happened next? What her new husband, Marcus, did in front of everyone would change everything I thought I knew about my family, about loyalty, and about the woman I'd called my sister for 28 years. Let me back up to where this all started, 3 months earlier, when I first met Marcus Hoffman at Madison's engagement party. I'd driven down from Seattle to Portland, specifically for that party, taking time off from my job at the tech startup where I worked as a software developer. Madison had always been the golden child in our family, the one with the perfect grades, the perfect job as a corporate lawyer, the perfect everything. Me? I was what our parents politely called the creative one, which was their way of saying I'd never quite lived up to Madison's standards. The engagement party was held at the Hoffman family estate in the West Hills, a sprawling property that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. Marcus came from old Portland money. His grandfather had founded Hoffman Industries, a manufacturing company that had been supplying the Pacific Northwest with industrial equipment for over 60 years. When Madison introduced us, I expected the usual polite handshake and forgettable small talk that comes with meeting your sibling's significant other. Instead, Marcus grabbed my hand with both of his and looked me directly in the eye. "Tyler, Madison told me so much about you. She says you're brilliant with computers." I glanced at Madison, surprised. She'd told him I was brilliant? That didn't sound like the sister I knew, the one who'd spent our entire childhood pointing out everything I did wrong. "I dabble?" I said modestly. "He's being humble," Madison interjected, though her smile seemed forced. "Tyler practically built his company's entire security infrastructure from scratch." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Really? We've been having some issues with our systems at Hoffman Industries. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime and you could take a look?" Over the next few weeks, Marcus and I did exactly that. What started as a simple consultation turned into a genuine friendship. I discovered that beneath his polished exterior, Marcus was genuinely curious about people and passionate about technology. He wasn't the privileged snob I'd expected. He asked thoughtful questions, remembered details from our previous conversations, and actually seemed interested in my opinion. The problems at Hoffman Industries were more complex than Marcus had initially described. Their entire network was vulnerable, running on outdated systems that hadn't been properly maintained in years. The previous IT director had apparently been more interested in collecting paychecks than actually securing their data. "This is actually pretty serious," I told Marcus during one of our coffee meetings at a small cafe downtown. "You're one successful phishing attack away from losing everything: customer data, financial records, proprietary manufacturing processes." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, looking genuinely worried. "My father's been after me to modernize everything since he started transitioning leadership to me, but honestly, I don't even know where to begin." "I could help," I offered. "It would take some time, probably a few months of evenings and weekends, but I could overhaul your entire system." "I couldn't ask you to do that. You already have a full-time job." "Consider it a wedding present," I said with a grin. That's how I ended up spending most of my free time over the next 2 months at Hoffman Industries, working late into the night to rebuild their digital infrastructure. Marcus would often stay with me, bringing coffee and asking questions about what I was doing. Sometimes Madison would join us, though she usually seemed distracted, scrolling through wedding planning apps on her phone or taking calls from the florist. During those late nights, Marcus and I talked about everything: his pressure to live up to his family's legacy, my struggles with feeling like the family disappointment, our shared love of old science fiction movies, and our very different perspectives on success and money. "You know what I admire about you?" Marcus said one evening as we tested the new firewall configurations. "You built something from nothing." My success, if you can even call it that, was handed to me. I inherited a company, inherited wealth, inherited expectations. But you? You created your own path. I laughed, gesturing around the high-tech office space. Yeah, my own path that led me to working for free in someone else's company at midnight on a Tuesday. That's exactly what I mean, Marcus said seriously. You're here because you want to be, because you care about doing good work, not because your last name is on the building. As the wedding approached, I started noticing tension between Marcus and Madison that I hadn't seen before. Small things, mostly. The way Madison would interrupt Marcus when he was talking about the business, or how she'd roll her eyes when he mentioned wanting to implement some of the changes I'd suggested. During one particularly heated discussion about the guest list, I heard Madison snap at Marcus in the kitchen. Just because Tyler fixed a few computers doesn't make him family, Marcus. He's still the same loser who couldn't even finish college the first time around. I pretended not to hear it, but the words stung. Madison was referring to the fact that I'd dropped out of my computer science program junior year to care for our grandmother during her final illness. I'd eventually gone back and finished my degree, but it had taken me 6 years instead of 4. To Madison, that delay represented everything that was wrong with me. My lack of focus, my tendency to let emotions override practical decisions. The night before the wedding, Marcus invited me to his bachelor party. It wasn't the typical Vegas blowout you might expect. Instead, it was a quiet dinner with his closest friends at a private dining room downtown. During the toasts, Marcus stood up and looked directly at me. I want to thank Tyler Morrison for becoming not just a friend these past few months, but honestly, one of the most trustworthy people I've ever known. He's taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who show up for you when it matters. I felt genuinely moved, but also confused. Why was Marcus talking about me like I was some kind of brother figure? We'd known each other for 3 months. And why did I get the feeling that this speech was somehow directed at Madison, who wasn't even there? The wedding day itself was everything Madison had dreamed of. Perfect weather, perfect flowers, perfect venue. I'd volunteered to handle some of the technical aspects, making sure the sound system worked properly, and that the photographer's equipment was set up correctly. It felt good to contribute something meaningful to Madison's big day. The ceremony was beautiful. Marcus looked genuinely happy as Madison walked down the aisle. And for a moment, I felt that warm satisfaction you get when someone you care about finds their person. Madison looked stunning, and when she smiled at Marcus at the altar, I saw a softness in her expression that I hadn't seen in years. The reception started off perfectly. The first few hours were filled with heartfelt toasts, elegant dinner service, and the kind of sophisticated celebration that the Hoffman family was known for. I found myself actually enjoying the evening, chatting with Marcus's friends, and even dancing with a few of Madison's college roommates. Then came the moment when everything fell apart. I was standing near the dessert table, talking to Marcus's cousin about a potential consulting project, when I overheard Madison talking to a group of her law firm colleagues. She'd had quite a bit to drink, more than I'd ever seen her consume, and her voice was louder than usual. The thing about Tyler, she was saying, gesturing with her champagne flute, is that he's always been a parasite. Even when we were kids, he'd latch on to whatever I was doing and try to make it about himself. Now he's doing the same thing with Marcus. Her friends looked uncomfortable, glancing around to see if anyone else was listening. I should have walked away. I should have pretended I hadn't heard. Instead, I found myself stepping closer. He shows up here, acts all helpful and charming, gets Marcus to trust him, and now he thinks he's part of this family, Madison continued. But he's not. He's the same pathetic little brother who couldn't make it on his own, so he has to ride other people's coattails. That's when I couldn't stay silent anymore. Madison, I said, stepping into their circle, can we talk privately? She turned around, her face flushed with alcohol and anger. Oh, look who's here. Were you eavesdropping, Tyler? That's so typical. You're drunk, I said quietly. Maybe we should. I'm not drunk, she snapped. I'm finally being honest. About you, about this whole situation, about the way you've been manipulating my husband. The word, manipulating, hit me like a physical blow. Manipulating? Madison, I've been helping Marcus with legitimate business problems. I've never asked for anything in return. Right, because you're so selfless, she said sarcastically. Just like when you helped Grandma and made Mom and Dad feel guilty for not dropping everything like you did. That crossed a line. Our grandmother's death was still a painful subject for our entire family, and Madison knew it. "That's not fair, and you know it," I said, my voice getting louder despite my efforts to keep this conversation quiet. But it was too late for quiet. Other guests were starting to notice the commotion. Madison's voice rose to match mine. "What's not fair is you inserting yourself into my marriage, into my husband's business, into my wedding day. You can't stand that I'm successful, that I found someone amazing, that my life turned out better than yours." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "This isn't about competition, Madison. This is about family." "Family?" She laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about family? Family doesn't sabotage each other. Family doesn't steal other people's relationships." "I haven't stolen anything." "Really? Then why does my husband talk about you more than he talks about me? Why does he come home excited about conversations with you? Why did he spend more time planning this wedding with you than with his actual bride?" I stared at her, genuinely confused. "Madison, that's not—" "Get out," she said suddenly, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Get out of my wedding. Get out of my life. You don't belong here, Tyler. You never have." And that's when she threw her champagne glass at my feet, shattering it across the marble floor as 200 guests turned to stare at us in shocked silence. The orchestra stopped playing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the waitstaff froze in place, unsure whether to clean up the glass or pretend they hadn't seen anything. In that moment of complete silence, I felt smaller than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Madison stood there in her perfect dress, surrounded by her perfect wedding, looking at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Every childhood insecurity, every moment of feeling like I wasn't good enough, every time I'd wondered if I really belonged in this family, it all came crashing down on me at once. I was about to turn and leave, to walk out of that ballroom with whatever dignity I had left, when Marcus stepped forward from the crowd. His face pale but determined. He looked at the shattered glass, then at Madison, then at me. The silence in the ballroom was so complete, you could hear the ice settling in abandoned drinks at distant tables. "Madison," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the room despite its softness. "What are you doing?" She turned to face him, her expression shifting from rage to something that looked almost like panic. "Marcus, Tyler was eavesdropping and—" "I heard what you said." Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it that I'd never heard before. Steel. I heard every word. Madison's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. Around us, guests began whispering among themselves, uncertain whether to stay or give the family privacy. Marcus's father stepped forward as if to intervene, but Marcus held up a hand to stop him. "Tyler," Marcus said, turning to me, "don't leave." I looked around at the sea of faces staring at us. Madison's law firm colleagues, Marcus's business associates, both sets of parents looking mortified, bridesmaids clutching their bouquets like shields. This was supposed to be their perfect day, and I'd ruined it simply by existing. "Marcus, I should go," I said. "This is your wedding day." "Don't let me." "This is exactly why you should stay," Marcus interrupted. He walked over to where I stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Madison, I need you to apologize to your brother." "Apologize?" Madison's voice cracked. "Marcus, you don't understand. Tyler has been—" "I understand perfectly." Marcus's words were measured, deliberate. "Tyler has spent the last 2 months working for free to save my family's business. He's given up his evenings and weekends, turned down paid consulting work, and asked for nothing in return. He did it as a favor to me, and as a gift to you." The guests had formed a loose circle around us now, nobody quite sure whether they should intervene or disappear. Marcus's grandmother was fanning herself with her program while his uncle looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest table. Madison's hands were shaking. "You don't know him like I do. Tyler always has an agenda. He's been jealous of me our whole lives, and now he's trying to—" "Stop." The single word from Marcus cut through her sentence like a blade. "Just stop." He turned to address the room, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The bar remains open, and I believe they're about to serve the wedding cake. It was a dismissal, politely worded but unmistakable. Slowly, conversations resumed. The orchestra began playing again. But everyone's attention remained fixed on our little drama, even as they pretended to look away. Marcus waited until the noise level had risen enough to provide some privacy, then turned back to Madison. "We need to talk, privately." "Not until Tyler leaves," Madison said, her jaw set in that stubborn line I remembered from childhood arguments. "Tyler isn't going anywhere." Marcus looked at me. "Are you?" I honestly wasn't sure. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there, to save whatever was left of Marcus and Madison's marriage by removing myself from the equation. But something in Marcus's expression stopped me. "I'll stay if you want me to," I said. Marcus nodded. "I want you to." He turned back to Madison. "Your brother has been nothing but generous and kind to both of us. He's worked tirelessly to help my family, and he's been a better friend to me in 3 months than some people I've known for years. And you just humiliated him in front of 200 people on our wedding day." Madison's carefully styled hair was starting to come loose from its pins. Tears were forming in her eyes, threatening her makeup. "Marcus, you're taking his side over mine? On our wedding day?" "I'm not taking sides. I'm standing up for what's right." That's when Madison's composure finally cracked completely. "What's right? What's right is that you're my husband. What's right is that your loyalty should be to me, not to my pathetic little brother who can't even..." "Don't." Marcus's voice was quiet, but it stopped Madison mid-sentence. "Don't finish that sentence." He walked over to the nearest table and picked up someone's abandoned wine glass, taking a long sip before setting it back down. When he looked up, his expression had changed. The easygoing, accommodating Marcus I'd known was gone, replaced by someone who looked every inch the CEO he was destined to become. "Madison, do you want to know what Tyler did for Hoffman Industries?" he asked. "Do you want to know the real scope of what he accomplished?" "Marcus, please don't," I started, but he held up a hand. "Our cybersecurity audit came back this week," Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on Madison. "Do you know what they found? They found a system so secure, so elegantly designed, that they recommended we license Tyler's architecture to other companies. They said it was some of the most sophisticated work they'd seen from a team half the size of Microsoft's security division." Madison's mouth opened, then closed. "Tyler didn't just fix our computers, Madison. He built us a fortress, a digital infrastructure that's probably worth more than this entire wedding cost. And he did it for free, as a gift to us." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "This morning, our insurance company sent over a revised policy. Our premiums dropped by 60% because of Tyler's work." 60%. Madison, do you know how much money that saves us every year? I felt heat rising in my cheeks. This wasn't why I'd helped Marcus, and I didn't want it to become about money or business value. "Marcus, that's not why I know that's not why you did it," Marcus said. "That's exactly my point. You did it because you're a good person who wanted to help." He turned back to Madison. "And your sister just called that person a parasite in front of everyone we know." The word hung in the air between them. Madison flinched as if Marcus had slapped her. "I was upset," she said weakly. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." Marcus folded the envelope and put it back in his pocket. "You meant every word. The question is why." That's when things got really uncomfortable. Marcus stepped closer to Madison, and I could see him struggling with something, some decision he was trying to make in real time. "Madison, can I ask you something? And I want you to be honest with me, the way married couples should be honest with each other." She nodded, though she looked terrified. "Did you know about the problems at Hoffman Industries before you introduced me to Tyler?" The question seemed to come out of nowhere. Madison blinked, confused. "What?" "The cybersecurity issues, the outdated systems, the vulnerability reports that our previous IT director had been hiding from us for months. Did you know about any of that before your engagement party?" Madison's confusion deepened. "No, of course not. How would I know about your company's computer problems?" Marcus nodded slowly, as if her answer confirmed something he'd been suspecting. "So when you told me Tyler was brilliant with computers, When you suggested I might want to talk to him about our systems, that was just… What? Coincidence? I was trying to be supportive, Madison said, her voice growing defensive. I thought you two might get along. I thought Tyler could maybe help you with minor stuff. Minor stuff, Marcus repeated the words like he was tasting them. Madison, our company was 3 weeks away from a complete system failure. 3 weeks from losing everything. Customer data, financial records, proprietary manufacturing processes that took my grandfather decades to develop. If Tyler hadn't rebuilt our infrastructure when he did, Hoffman Industries would be bankrupt right now. The color drained from Madison's face. I didn't know it was that serious. No, you didn't. Marcus's expression softened slightly, but Tyler figured it out within the first week. And instead of charging us the $100,000 that kind of work would normally cost, instead of leveraging it into a permanent position or a business partnership, he just fixed it. Because he cares about people. Marcus looked around the ballroom, at the elegant decorations and expensive floral arrangements, at the guests who were still pretending not to listen to our conversation. This wedding cost more than most people make in 2 years, he said quietly. The dress you're wearing cost more than Tyler makes in a month. And yet he spent his free time for 2 months working to protect my family's legacy, asking for nothing in return. Madison was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. Marcus, I'm sorry, I didn't know. That's not the worst part, Marcus continued. The worst part is that I think you did this on purpose. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Madison stared at him, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. I think you set Tyler up to fail, Marcus said. I think you introduced us hoping that Tyler would disappoint me somehow, prove that he really was the family failure you've always believed him to be. But instead, he exceeded every expectation I had. That's not true, Madison whispered. Isn't it? Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through something. 3 days ago, you asked me if I was sure about having Tyler handle the sound system for today. You said he had a history of not following through on commitments. Yesterday you joked that I shouldn't be surprised if Tyler showed up late or forgot something important. I stared at Madison, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. All those small comments, the little digs disguised as concern, the way she'd seemed almost disappointed when Marcus praised my work. You wanted me to fail, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Madison's tears were flowing freely now. Tyler, I didn't. You did. Marcus's voice was flat. You introduced Tyler to me hoping he'd embarrass himself, embarrass you, prove that you were right about him. But instead, he saved my family's business, so you had to find another way to tear him down. Marcus walked over to the head table and picked up something I hadn't noticed before, a small wrapped package that had been sitting next to the wedding cake. This is for you, he said, holding it out to me. I looked at the package, then at Madison, then back at Marcus. I don't understand. It's a wedding gift, Marcus said. From both of us to you. Madison's eyes widened. Marcus, what are you? Open it, Marcus said to me. With shaking hands, I unwrapped the package. Inside was a small jewelry box, the kind that might hold a watch or cufflinks. But when I opened it, I found something completely unexpected. A set of keys attached to a small rectangular piece of paper. I looked up at Marcus, completely bewildered. Those are the keys to the house on Elm Street, Marcus said calmly, the Victorian that overlooks the river, the one my family has been renovating for the past year. My mind went blank. I knew the house he was talking about, a beautiful historic property in one of Portland's most desirable neighborhoods. Madison had mentioned it in passing, saying Marcus's parents were fixing it up as an investment property. I don't understand, I said. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. The deed transfers to you on Monday morning. The keys felt impossibly heavy in my palm. Around us, the wedding reception continued in a strange parallel universe, where people danced and laughed while my entire world tilted sideways. Marcus, I managed to say I can't accept this. You're not accepting it, Marcus replied, his voice eerily calm. It's already done. The paperwork was filed yesterday. Madison grabbed Marcus's arm. Yesterday? Marcus, what are you talking about? You can't just give away a house without consulting you? Marcus turned to face his bride, and I saw something in his expression that made me take a step back. Like how you didn't consult me before sabotaging your own brother. The accusation hit Madison like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her hand going to her throat. I didn't sabotage anyone. Really? Marcus reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Then maybe you can explain this. He scrolled to something on the screen and held it up so Madison could see. From where I stood, I could make out what looked like a text message thread, but I couldn't read the details. Madison's face went white. Where did you get that? Your phone was sitting on the kitchen counter this morning while you were getting ready. It kept buzzing with messages, and I thought it might be something important about the wedding. Marcus's voice was perfectly level, which somehow made it more terrifying. Imagine my surprise when I saw a 3-week conversation with your college roommate Sarah about your plan to expose Tyler. My stomach dropped. Sarah Mitchell had been Madison's roommate at law school, and they'd remained close friends ever since. She was here tonight, sitting at table 6 with her husband and twin daughters. Marcus, you read my private messages? Madison's voice was shrill with panic. I read enough. Marcus scrolled through the phone. Should I share some highlights with everyone? Or would you prefer to explain to Tyler yourself why you told Sarah, and I quote, I'm finally going to show Marcus who Tyler really is. The ballroom seemed to be spinning around me. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else, some poor guy whose sister had orchestrated his public humiliation at her own wedding. Madison, I said quietly, please tell me this isn't true. She couldn't meet my eyes. Tyler, it's not what it sounds like. Then what is it? Marcus demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you spent 3 weeks planning to embarrass your brother at our wedding. It sounds like you were hoping I'd witness Tyler having some kind of breakdown so I'd finally see him the way you do. Marcus held up the phone again. Here's my personal favorite. If Tyler makes a scene tonight, Marcus will finally understand what I've been dealing with my whole life. The words hung in the air like poison. I felt something breaking inside my chest. Some fundamental belief I'd held about family, about Madison, about my place in the world. You wanted me to make a scene, I said, the pieces finally falling into place. That's why you kept pushing tonight. That's why you were drinking so much, why you were talking about me so loudly near the dessert table. You wanted me to overhear you. Madison's mascara was running freely now, creating dark streaks down her cheeks. Tyler, please, just let me explain. Explain what? The anger in my voice surprised even me. Explain how you used your own wedding as a trap. Explain how you manipulated your husband into watching you destroy me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Madison sobbed. You were supposed to just leave. You were supposed to slink away like you always do when things get difficult. Like I always do? I stared at her, genuinely confused. When have I ever run away from anything difficult? Are you kidding me? Madison's grief morphed back into anger. You ran away from college when Grandma got sick. You ran away from that internship at Goldman Sachs because you said it didn't feel right. You've been running away from responsibility your entire life. I didn't run away from college, Madison. I took a leave of absence to take care of a dying woman because no one else in our family could be bothered to do it. Mom and Dad wanted to put her in a facility. Mom and Dad wanted to put her in a warehouse where they could forget about her. My voice was getting louder, and I didn't care who heard. I spent 18 months watching our grandmother waste away from Alzheimer's, changing her diapers and feeding her soup, and reading her the same stories over and over because it was the only thing that calmed her down. And you think I did that to avoid responsibility? Marcus was watching this exchange with an expression I couldn't read. Around us, the wedding guests had given up all pretense of not listening. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. Madison wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup further. You used Grandma as an excuse to avoid growing up, just like you're using Marcus now as an excuse to avoid building your own life. Using Marcus? I turned to look at him. Is that what you think? That I've been using you? Marcus shook his head. Tyler, I know exactly why you helped me. I've known from the beginning. He walked over to where Madison stood, swaying slightly in her expensive heels. Your sister, on the other hand, seems to think that kindness always comes with strings attached. That's not what I think, Madison protested. Isn't it? Marcus pulled up another message on the phone. Here you are, telling Sarah that Tyler is probably angling for a job at Hoffman Industries, and here's where you say he's trying to get close to Marcus for the money. Each quote felt like a knife between my ribs. This was my sister, the person who'd known me longer than anyone else in the world, and she genuinely believed I was capable of such calculated manipulation. Madison, I said softly, do you really think so little of me? For a moment her anger seemed to crumble. She looked at me with something that might have been regret, or maybe just exhaustion. I think, she said slowly, that you've always been everyone's favorite broken bird. Poor Tyler, who dropped out of school. Poor Tyler, who couldn't hack it in the corporate world. Poor Tyler, who needs everyone to take care of him. The cruelty in her words took my breath away. Is that really how you see me? It's how everyone sees you, Madison's voice broke. Mom still sends you money every month. Dad still asks me to keep an eye on you, like you're some kind of invalid. Even Marcus, she gestured wildly at her husband. Even Marcus talks about you like you're some kind of saint who needs protecting. Maybe, Marcus said quietly. I talk about Tyler that way because he's the only person I've met who does good things without expecting anything in return. He walked back over to me and placed his hand on my shoulder. Tyler, I need you to understand something. The house isn't a gift, it's not charity. It's payment for services rendered. Marcus, no. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. Let me finish. Hoffman Industries was 3 weeks away from collapse when you stepped in. Complete system failure. We would have lost everything. Decades of work, hundreds of jobs, my family's entire legacy. The consulting firm I hired to assess your work estimated that you saved us somewhere between $8 and $12 million. The number was so large it didn't seem real. Madison's mouth fell open. 12 million? She whispered. Conservative estimate. Marcus nodded. Tyler rebuilt our entire digital infrastructure from the ground up. He created security protocols that are better than what most Fortune 500 companies use. He did it in 2 months, working nights and weekends, and he never sent us a bill. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. This morning, I had my lawyers draft a consulting agreement. Industry standard rates for the work Tyler performed would be $847,000. The folder felt surreal in his hands, like a prop from someone else's life. Tyler, you've earned enough to buy that house 3 times over. I'm not giving it to you. I'm paying you what you're worth. Madison stared at the folder like it might explode. $800,000? For Tyler? For Tyler's work, Marcus corrected. Work that you dismissed as fixing a few computers. I looked around the ballroom, at all these people in expensive clothes, drinking expensive wine, celebrating a marriage that seemed to be disintegrating before their eyes. Marcus's parents looked mortified. Madison's college friends were whispering among themselves. The photographer had stopped taking pictures altogether. This is insane, I said finally. Marcus, you can't pay me $800,000, and you definitely can't give me a house. This is your wedding day. You should be dancing with your wife, not having a financial negotiation with her brother. Marcus looked at Madison, who was still staring at the folder in his hands. You're right. This should be the happiest day of my life. He handed me the folder. But instead, I'm finding out that my wife spent weeks plotting to humiliate the man who saved my family's business. I'm discovering that the person I married thinks so little of her own brother that she'd rather destroy him than admit he might actually be worth something. Madison flinched. Marcus, that's not. What did you think was going to happen tonight, Madison? Marcus's voice was getting louder now, his calm facade finally cracking. Did you think Tyler would break down crying? Did you think he'd run away and prove once and for all that he's the failure you've always claimed he is? I thought, Madison's voice was barely a whisper. I thought if you saw how he really acts under pressure, you'd understand why I've been so worried about him getting too close to our family. Our family? Marcus stared at her. Madison, Tyler is your family. He's been your family a lot longer than I have. The truth of that statement seemed to hit Madison like a physical blow. She looked around the ballroom, at all the people watching her marriage implode in real time. and something in her expression changed. "I can't do this," she said suddenly. "I can't do this anymore." She turned and walked away, her wedding dress trailing behind her as she headed for the exit. Marcus called after her, but she didn't stop. The ballroom doors swung closed behind her with a soft thud that somehow echoed like a gunshot. Marcus and I stood there in the silence that followed, surrounded by 200 people who had just witnessed something that would probably be talked about at Portland society gatherings for years to come. "Should you go after her?" I asked. Marcus looked at the closed doors, then at me, then at the folder still in my hands. "Honestly, I don't know what I should do right now." The silence in the ballroom stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on Marcus and me, waiting to see what would happen next. The wedding cake sat untouched on its crystal stand, the elaborate sugar flowers now seeming absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. Marcus's father approached us cautiously, his face grave with concern. Robert Hoffman was a distinguished man in his 70s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that came from decades of running a successful business. "Son," he said quietly, "perhaps we should." "Not now, Dad." Marcus's voice was firm but not unkind. "Tyler and I need to figure this out." Robert nodded, glancing once at the folder in my hands before retreating to where Marcus's mother stood, wringing her handkerchief. I could see other family members and friends exchanging worried glances, uncertain whether to stay or leave. "Marcus," I said, "we should go somewhere private. Let your guests enjoy the rest of the evening." Marcus looked around the ballroom, taking in the awkward clusters of people trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed the most dramatic wedding disaster in Portland's social history. "You're right." He walked over to the bandleader and whispered something. Within moments, the orchestra resumed playing, and Marcus addressed the room with the same commanding presence I'd seen him use in business meetings. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sharing this evening with us. Please continue to enjoy the reception. The bar remains open, and I believe the dessert course will be served shortly." It was a masterful deflection, giving people permission to pretend everything was normal while we dealt with the crisis privately. Marcus gestured toward a side door that led to a smaller event room, and I followed him out of the ballroom. The contrast was jarring. One moment we were surrounded by the chaos of 200 confused wedding guests, and the next we were alone in a quiet room, furnished with elegant couches and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the hotel's gardens. Marcus loosened his tie and sat down heavily on one of the couches. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he looked like what he was, a man whose marriage had just imploded in front of everyone he knew. "I'm sorry," I said, settling into the chair across from him. "I'm so sorry this happened on your wedding day." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tyler, you have nothing to apologize for. If anyone should be sorry, it's me." "You? Marcus, you didn't do anything wrong." "Didn't I?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I married someone without really knowing who she was. I let Madison manipulate this entire situation without recognizing what was happening. And I may have just destroyed my marriage to prove a point." I set the folder down on the coffee table between us, unable to quite process that it contained a check for more money than I'd ever imagined having. "Do you regret it? Standing up for me, I mean?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the windows at the carefully manicured gardens. "Tyler, can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone?" I nodded. When I was growing up, everyone always knew exactly what my future would look like. I'd graduate from the right schools, marry the right person, take over the family business, and continue the Hoffman legacy. There was never any question about it, never any choice. It was just predetermined. He stood up and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. And for the most part, I was okay with that. I knew I was privileged, knew I had opportunities most people don't get. But I also knew that nothing I accomplished would ever really be mine. "That's not true," I said. "You've done incredible things with the company." "Have I? Or have I just been following a script that was written before I was born?" Marcus turned back to face me. "Then I met you, and for the first time in my life, I met someone who built something from nothing, someone who succeeded because of talent and hard work. not because of their last name. The honesty in his voice was almost painful to hear. Marcus, you're being too hard on yourself. Am I? Tyler, you dropped out of college to care for your grandmother. You could have resented that, could have let it derail your entire life. Instead, you went back, finished your degree, and built a career doing something you love. You made choices based on what you thought was right, not what was expected of you. Marcus sat back down, running his hands through his hair. When Madison first introduced us, I thought she was being supportive. I thought she was proud of you. But as I got to know you better, I started noticing things. The way she'd make little comments about your unrealistic career choices. The way she'd joke about your phases, when you were just trying different approaches to life. I thought about all the family dinners over the years, all the subtle ways Madison had undermined my confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. She's always been competitive. This wasn't a competition, Tyler, this was something else. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to the text messages again. Do you want to know what really made me sick when I read these? It wasn't just that Madison was planning to embarrass you, it was that she genuinely believed you deserved it. He held up the phone so I could see the screen. Look at this message from last week. Tyler has been coasting on sympathy his whole life. It's time someone showed him what the real world is like. The words stung, but I wasn't entirely surprised. Madison's always thought I took the easy way out. The easy way out? Marcus stared at me incredulously. Tyler, you rebuilt our entire digital infrastructure in 2 months. You saved my family's business. You did work that our previous IT director couldn't accomplish in 2 years. How is any of that the easy way out? I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. It's just what needed to be done. Exactly. Marcus stood up again, pacing now. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You saw a problem and you fixed it because it was the right thing to do. You didn't calculate the cost-benefit ratio or negotiate terms up front. You just helped because that's who you are. He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. Madison doesn't understand that kind of thinking. Everything is transactional to her. Every relationship, every favor, every kindness comes with strings attached because that's how she operates. The realization was settling over me like cold water. She really thought I was using you. She couldn't conceive of any other explanation for why you'd help me. Marcus sat back down, his expression sad. And tonight, when you proved her wrong, when it became clear that you were genuinely just trying to help, she couldn't handle it. So she attacked you instead of admitting she'd misjudged you. We sat in silence for a few minutes, processing the wreckage of the evening. Through the walls, I could hear the muffled sounds of the reception continuing. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses, life going on as if the world hadn't just tilted sideways. What happens now? I asked finally. Marcus looked at the folder on the coffee table. Well, for starters, you're going to accept that consulting fee. Marcus, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. His voice brooked no argument. Tyler, this isn't charity. This is what your work is worth. If you'd charged us market rates from the beginning, that folder would contain even more money. I picked up the folder, still unable to quite believe it was real. What about Madison? What about your marriage? Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. I don't know, he said finally. I love Madison. I've loved her since the day I met her. But tonight I saw a side of her that I'm not sure I can forgive. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. Do they? Or do they finally say what they really think? Marcus looked up at me. Tyler, Madison spent weeks planning this. She didn't lash out in anger. She calculated how to hurt you in the most public way possible. That's not something you do to someone you love. I thought about my sister, about the years of small cuts disguised as jokes. The way she'd always managed to make me feel like I was falling short of some invisible standard. Maybe she really believes what she said about me? Then she's wrong. Marcus's voice was firm. And frankly, if she can't see what kind of person you really are after watching you work for 2 months, then she's not as smart as I thought she was. There was a soft knock at the door, and Marcus's father peered in. Son, I hate to interrupt, but people are starting to ask questions. And Madison, he paused. Madison is in the bridal suite. She's asking to speak with you. Marcus closed his eyes. Of course she is. You should go to her, I said. She's your wife. Is she? Marcus stood up slowly. I mean, legally, yes. But after tonight, I don't know what we are anymore. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. Tyler, whatever happens with Madison and me, I want you to know something. You saved my family's business, yes. But more than that, you've shown me what it looks like when someone does the right thing without expecting anything in return. That's worth more than any amount of money. Marcus paused at the door. The keys to the house are in that folder, along with the deed and the consulting agreement. Everything's already been legally transferred. Whether you choose to live there or sell it or turn it into a museum, it's yours now. Marcus. No arguments. You earned it. He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. And Tyler? Whatever Madison says about tonight, whatever story she tells people about what happened here, remember this. You did nothing wrong. You were exactly who you've always been. Someone who helps people because it's the right thing to do. With that, he left to face his wife, leaving me alone with a folder full of legal documents that would change my life forever. I sat there for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the reception, trying to process everything that had happened. 6 hours ago, I'd been a guy who worked in tech and helped his sister's fiancé with some computer problems. Now I owned a house and had more money than I'd ever dreamed of, but I'd also lost my sister in the most public way possible. The folder felt impossibly heavy in my hands as I finally stood up and walked back toward the ballroom. I had no idea what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I walked back into the ballroom to find the reception had taken on a surreal quality. The orchestra was playing cheerful jazz standards, while guests clustered in small groups, whispering among themselves with the kind of excited energy that comes from witnessing genuine drama. Some people were actually dancing, apparently deciding that the show must go on, while others stood around nursing drinks and checking their phones. Marcus's cousin Jennifer approached me as I made my way through the crowd. She was a pediatric surgeon at Oregon Health and Science University, someone I'd always respected for her straightforward manner. "Tyler," she said quietly, "are you okay?" The simple question caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, no one had actually asked how I was doing. "I'm processing," I said honestly. Jennifer nodded. "For what it's worth, I think Marcus did the right thing. Madison was out of line tonight. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. And frankly, a lot of us have been wondering for months if she was really the right fit for him." Before I could respond, she squeezed my arm and melted back into the crowd. It struck me that this was probably happening all over the ballroom. People taking sides, forming opinions about a marriage that had just begun and might already be over. I found myself gravitating toward the bar, not because I wanted another drink, but because it was the one place in the room where I could stand with my back to the wall and observe everything happening around me. The bartender, a professional woman in her 40s who'd probably worked hundreds of weddings, gave me a sympathetic look. "Rough night?" she asked quietly. "You could say that." She poured me a club soda without being asked. In 20 years of wedding catering, I've seen some doozies, but this... She shook her head. "This is going to be talked about for a long time." Through the crowd, I spotted my parents standing near the dessert table, looking lost and uncomfortable. My father kept adjusting his tie, something he only did when he was deeply anxious, while my mother clutched her purse like a life preserver. I made my way over to them, dreading the conversation but knowing it was inevitable. "Tyler," my mother said as I approached, her voice thick with worry. "Honey, what happened? Where's Madison?" My father put his arm around my mother's shoulders, a protective gesture that told me they'd already heard some version of tonight's events from other guests. "Madison and Marcus are talking privately," I said carefully. "There was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" My mother's voice rose slightly. "Tyler, people are saying Madison called you terrible names in front of everyone. They're saying Marcus gave you some kind of deed to a house." I looked down at the folder still clutched in my hands. Word traveled fast in social circles like this, apparently. "It's complicated, Mom." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Son, is it true that you've been working on Marcus's business for months, for free?" The question surprised me. I'd mentioned helping Marcus with some computer issues, but I'd downplayed the scope of the work to avoid exactly this kind of attention. I helped them upgrade their systems, I said. It wasn't that big a deal. Tyler. My father's voice carried the tone he'd used when I was a child, and he knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. We just spoke with Robert Hoffman. He said you saved their entire company. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Dad, I just did what needed to be done. My mother was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Honey, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us you were doing such important work? The question hung in the air, loaded with years of unspoken family dynamics. Why hadn't I told them? Because I'd learned early that my accomplishments were always measured against Madison's. Because I'd gotten tired of seeing that flicker of surprise in their eyes whenever I succeeded at something. I didn't think you'd be interested, I said quietly. My parents exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation, my mother's eyes filled with tears. Oh, sweetheart, she said, reaching for my hand. Of course we'd be interested, you're our son. I know, but… No buts. My father's voice was firm. Tyler, I need you to listen to me. Your mother and I have made mistakes over the years. We've probably relied too much on Madison to look out for you. But that doesn't mean we don't see your value. I stared at him, caught off guard by the directness of the admission. We know you think we favor Madison, my mother added softly. And maybe we have in some ways. She's always been so sure of herself, so clear about what she wanted. But Tyler, honey, we've always been proud of you. We've just been worried. Worried about what? Worried that the world would be too harsh for someone with your heart, my father said. Someone who puts other people's needs before his own. Someone who drops everything to take care of his grandmother or help a friend's business without asking for anything in return. My mother nodded. We wanted to protect you. But maybe in trying to protect you, we made you feel like we didn't believe in you. I felt something loosening in my chest, a knot of resentment and hurt that I'd been carrying for years without even realizing it. I never needed protection, I said. I just needed you to see me. We see you now, my father said firmly, and we're incredibly proud of who you've become. Before I could respond, there was a commotion near the ballroom entrance. Marcus had returned, but he was alone. His face was pale, and his usually perfect posture had slumped slightly. He scanned the room until his eyes found mine, then made his way through the crowd toward us. Tyler, he said when he reached our group, I need to talk to you. My parents stepped back respectfully, giving us space while remaining close enough to show their support. How is Madison? I asked. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, destroying what was left of his carefully styled wedding look. Madison is… processing. She's asked for some time alone. Are you okay? Marcus let out a laugh that held no humor. Tyler, I just had to explain to my wife why I gave her brother a house. She accused me of having an affair with you, of conspiring against her, well, let's just say the conversation didn't go well. The weight of what Marcus had sacrificed tonight hit me fully for the first time. He'd stood up for me, yes, but in doing so, he'd potentially destroyed his marriage on his wedding day. Marcus, I'm so sorry. If I had known this would happen… Stop. Marcus held up his hand. Tyler, if you apologize one more time tonight, I'm going to lose my mind. You didn't cause this. Madison's choices caused this. He looked around the ballroom, at the guests who were still pretending to enjoy themselves, while obviously waiting to see what would happen next. I need to make an announcement, Marcus said. I need to officially end this reception before it becomes even more of a spectacle. What will you tell people? Marcus straightened his shoulders, and I saw the CEO in him taking over. The truth, that my wife and I need some time to work through some personal issues, and that we appreciate everyone's understanding. He paused, looking directly at me. And I'm going to make it clear that you are welcome in the Hoffman family, regardless of what happens between Madison and me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. Tyler, you saved my family's business. More than that, you've become one of the most important people in my life in just 3 months. I'm not going to let Madison's issues change that. Marcus walked over to the bandleader and whispered something. The music stopped, and Marcus took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice carried clearly across the room. Thank you all for celebrating with Madison and me tonight. Unfortunately, we're going to need to cut the evening short. Madison is feeling unwell, and we want to make sure she gets the rest she needs. It was a graceful lie, giving Madison a face-saving excuse while allowing the guests to leave without feeling like they were abandoning a sinking ship. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The bars in the hotel lounge will remain open for those who wish to continue celebrating. Thank you again for your love and support. The announcement triggered a flurry of activity as guests began gathering their belongings and saying their goodbyes. Marcus worked the room like the politician he could have been, shaking hands and accepting well wishes while deflecting questions about Madison's absence. Eventually, the ballroom emptied except for family and a few close friends. Marcus's parents approached us, their faces grave with concern. "Son," Robert Hoffman said quietly, "what do you need from us?" Marcus looked at his father, then at me, then back at his father. "I need you to understand that Tyler Morrison is family now. Whatever happens between Madison and me, that doesn't change." Robert nodded solemnly. "Understood." Marcus's mother, an elegant woman who'd always been kind but distant, surprised me by stepping forward and taking my hands in hers. "Tyler," she said softly, "thank you for everything you've done for our family, and I'm sorry for what happened tonight. Madison's behavior was unacceptable." As the last of the guests filtered out, I found myself standing in the empty ballroom with Marcus, still holding the folder that contained the deed to a house and a check for more money than I'd ever imagined having. "So what happens now?" I asked. Marcus loosened his tie completely and sat down at the head table, looking exhausted. "Now I go home to a house that feels empty, and I try to figure out if my marriage can survive what happened tonight." "And Madison?" "Madison is going to stay with her friend Sarah for a few days. She says she needs time to think." Marcus picked up an abandoned champagne flute and stared into it. "Honestly, Tyler, I don't know if we can come back from this. It's not just what she said to you. It's the fact that she planned it. The fact that she could look at you, someone who sacrificed so much to help us, and see an enemy instead of family." I sat down beside him at the table where they should have been cutting their wedding cake together. "Do you love her?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I love who I thought she was. But tonight I met someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could be cruel and calculating and—" He trailed off. "I don't know if that person was always there and I just didn't see it. Or if she became that person somewhere along the way." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two men in expensive suits surrounded by the debris of what should have been the happiest day of Marcus's life. "Tyler," Marcus said finally, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens with Madison, whatever happens with my marriage, tonight was worth it." "How can you say that? Your wedding day is ruined." Marcus turned to look at me directly. "My wedding day taught me who my real family is. It taught me that doing the right thing matters more than keeping the peace. And it taught me that sometimes the most important relationships in your life come from the most unexpected places." He stood up and extended his hand to me. "Tyler Morrison, welcome to the family." I shook his hand, feeling the weight of everything that had changed between us, everything that had changed in my life in the span of a single evening. 6 months later, I was living in the beautiful Victorian house on Elm Street, running my own cybersecurity consulting firm with Marcus as my first major client. Madison and Marcus had tried couples therapy for 3 months before ultimately deciding to divorce. She'd never apologized for what happened at the wedding, but she'd stopped actively trying to undermine me, which felt like progress. Marcus and I had become genuine brothers, the kind I'd always wished I'd had. And sometimes, when I sat on the front porch of my house watching the sunset over the river, I thought about how the worst night of my life had somehow led to the best thing that ever happened to me. Family, it turns out, isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who see who you really are and choose to stand with you, even when it costs them everything. Sometimes it's about a man who hands you the deed to a house and calls you family, right in the middle of his own wedding disaster. And sometimes, just sometimes, being called a parasite leads to discovering that you've been a lifeline all along. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, These are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.